Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. I am here with Miss Jennifer Lehr. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a writer, and she is the founder of Reconcile, which is an app using the science of love to help couples and individuals improve their relationship. So, in this episode, we want to talk all about healing, emotions, self mastery, what's plaguing our families and our marriages, and we have a licensed professional to kind of shed some light on that. So Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about who you are and how did you get where you're at right now?
Okay, well, it's a long path, long winding journey. And so I grew up in a family. I was the eldest of four siblings, and my father was an artist, but he also had a pretty big bad temper. And my mother was probably on the spectrum, a lot of difficulty with emotions. And so when I, left and moved out into the world, I had I would say some areas where I felt crippled. So I wasn't good at relationships. I didn't have good self-esteem. I was afraid of standing up for myself. A lot of issues as a result of how I grew up. And I also had strong points as a result of how I grew up, but the weaknesses is what life forced me to look at first. So I ended up in some really difficult relationships, and one of them got me into a 12-step program. I was in Al-Anon for a number of 3 years, 3 times a week, let's say, and then a little longer, less. And that's where I learned a lot of basic skills of how to get out of my anxiety and start trusting the universe a little bit more. So that was my start. And so that whole the huge period was working on who am I and how do I become a more functional, solid human. While that was going on, I'm working on my career. So we have the two paths, the self-growth path and the career path. And they, for me, have always been connected, but you could also look at them separately. And I went to art school, got into the film business, then became a therapist. Later, went back to grad school, became a therapist, and worked with a lot of people, a lot of couples, a lot of children, a lot of everyone. And at some point, I realized that the couples I was working with were really, really struggling. They didn't know basic principles of relationships. And I started thinking there's got to be a way, and a lot of them couldn't afford hourly or weekly, hourly or longer sessions. Couple sessions tend to need to be longer. And so I started thinking about an educational program that could help couples gain what they needed to, understand so that they could have better relationships. And that's where that's how that We Can Solve became born out of that idea. And it's been a long, long, long process. Um,
Yeah, I'm sure.
yeah.
So, in your work, what is the biggest issues that you see that couples are dealing with?
Well, I always talk about attachment wounds. So, and when we're, depending on how, there's lots of good parents, but nobody is perfect.
Facts.
So that means there's a gap between what you needed and what you got. And those gaps contain wounds. Now, they could be horrible wounds, narcissistic wounds where you are stuck in yourself, or they could be wounds where you got rid of your feelings because they weren't attended to in a way that you could develop them well. Or they could be wounds where you're really needy or you don't have good self-esteem, but you end up with wounds and you bring those wounds into a relationship. And what I see is, if you, so I've had a lot of training and a lot of modalities, but my couples training was largely in emotionally focused therapy for couples, which is a very, very successful couples modality, has a highest success rate of helping people because it really gets into attachment and it gets into the way usually you have a person who is tends to shy away from feelings and a person who's trying to pursue the connection, and it creates like the dog chasing its tail kind of thing where you just go in circles. So you got to get them slowed down. You have to get the person who's highly anxious, trying to connect, to look at their needs and be able to talk about their needs instead of just trying to force something to happen. You have to get the person who's disconnected from their feelings to start to see what their deeper feelings are. Like, deep down, I don't feel good enough, or deep down, no matter what I do, I can't keep you happy. So you have to start working on that level of you can't stay at the surface level, which is, well, you know, you didn't take out the garbage this week. I mean, you have to deal with that, but it's not the real problem is I don't feel important because you don't consider how hard I work. And now you don't even help me and take out the garbage. It's really about you don't see how hard I work and you aren't supporting me. And I feel abandoned by you. You have to get
Yeah.
down to that.
And how important is it for us to align those needs? Because if I am wanting to connect, but then my partner is like avoiding connection, how important is that for the relationship to survive?
Well, I think if you want a good relationship, it's essential. Otherwise, you're always going to be, there's always going to be this struggle
Yeah,
happening. So
yeah.
yeah, it's important to figure out how to identify what's going on and start talking about it and getting vulnerable. Because when you're in that cycle, you're not being vulnerable.
Hmm.
And you have to be able to expand that ability and develop empathy for your partner's position too, because there's a reason your partner is the way they are.
Yeah,
They can't help it. They haven't developed certain capacities. And a
yeah.
lot of it's about what capacities have you developed and what capacities do you not know anything about because no one ever taught you.
Now, what about how do we get to the balance, right, of saving space for our partner who is in a healing journey, and then making sure that we're setting boundaries and that we're not being bombarded and sucked in or sucked dry by their healing journey?
Well, um,
Which I know is a capacity thing. I know it. But how
yeah,
do people balance it if you're in the middle of that right now?
yeah. I want you to give me a specific example. Let's work with a specific situation.
Okay. So if my spouse, all these childhood issues are now coming to the surface. They've been kind of pushed off for a long time, but it's coming to the surface. So let's just say it was childhood abuse or
Mhm.
something like that. And I understand that they're going to their own therapist. I understand that, but I'm still getting some of that bleed through at home. How do
Right.
I
Okay.
balance my own peace, my own happiness, and still
Right.
save space for what they're going through
Right. Yeah. So
without
this,
feeling like, you know what? I don't think I can handle this. This is a lot.
yeah. So this is a trick. Well, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. The one way is the 12-step way, which is making yourself okay in your own life, regardless of what's happening over there with the partner. And that's a really important piece. And you have to be on your own 2 feet, no matter what, or, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So there's that piece. The other piece is you have to start talking about the bleed through, in other words, I know that this horrible thing happened to you and it seems like you might be reacting and I'm not the person who did that to you. And how do we have a conversation or how do we deal with this so that you aren't, reacting? Because with the bleed through, it always comes from reacting, I'm assuming. I mean, generally it's a reaction. And when someone's reacting, they're taking probably a molecule of what you did and it turns into this huge world because of their past.
Yeah.
So they have to start working on linking. Oh, this person just did this and it reminds me of all this, but they're not that. And they have to start creating a separation between what happened and what's happening. And this happens in my own relationship with, you met my husband, Mike,
Yeah.
where he sometimes gets reactive. I'm like, what are you reacting about? He said, well, this reminds me of blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, but I'm not that person or that situation. He's like, you're right.
Yeah.
So, it's sort of getting it conscious, talking about it.
Yeah. And so it sounds like what you're saying is also we could be supportive as a partner by being aware of it and bringing it to their attention. Hey, I think you're overreacting, and this is not what's happening in this moment. Is what
Right, right. And I wouldn't say I think you're reacting because that could go wrong. I
trigger.
would say, yeah, I would say,
Yeah, yeah.
you seem really upset. I wonder if you misinterpreted what I did because I didn't mean any harm.
Mhm.
And can we talk about what happened for you? And because those wasn't my intentions to upset you.
Mhm. Now, what happens, or what can people do who are at there is a standstill in the relationship. It's not growing, but no one wants to exit.
Well, somebody's going to have to want something or nothing will happen. So they either want to exit or they want to make it better. If it's at the standstill where both of them have moved apart and they're sort of turned away, and need, like, this happens in burnt out relationships. Someone's been pursuing for a long time. I say this happened in my first marriage, because I'm in my second marriage. My first marriage was a difficult marriage. My second marriage is so easy,
Mhm.
90% of the time, 99% of the time. But so what happened was I kept trying to get more connection, more connection, more connection. And my husband, that first, he was walled in and he had a lot of anger issues. I picked someone sort of, my father had anger issues, so I picked someone else with anger issues.
Yep.
And he could not get a handle on that. Eventually, and we did couples therapy, we did therapy. I did so much therapy, I basically outgrew him, but that's a whole nother story. But
That's a whole nother rabbit hole when we
yeah, yeah,
grow our partner too. Yeah.
yeah. But I basically, at some point I said, not doing couples therapy with you anymore. You got stuff you have to work out. We sit there, I talk, you react. I'm done. And he was not willing to do whatever it took because I had already, at that point, I had turned away. I'm
Mhm.
not doing anymore. I killed myself to make this work. So it's your turn. And he couldn't do it. And I eventually ended it.
Mhm. And what is your, and this is maybe your personal opinion. I don't know if it would be a professional opinion, but what do you say to certain people in marriages who the relationship is toxic, it's abusive, but they have this belief that they took this marriage oath, or it's religious, or it's something, and they will not exit this very toxic, abusive relationship.
Yeah, so you can't always, you have to work sometimes in inches. You might see the mile, but they aren't ready to see the mile, just the view. So you work with the inches, and the inches is, and I'm thinking of a specific couple I worked with where he had a addiction, but nobody knew, a
Mm.
major addiction. And she just wanted it to work and wanted it to work and wanted it to work. And he was not being honest in the sessions with us or in his life. And I liked him, but it was a real problem. And she just couldn't let go. So the work was getting him again to keep getting into his deeper feelings and getting her to slow down and look at her pain and her needs and not just try to, turn into a whirling dervish who's trying to get him back. Well, that just pushed him further away. And
Mm.
eventually he did end up in rehab and he did a lot of good work and they learned how to coexist, but eventually it wasn't for them, it wasn't a good match.
Yeah.
But so it really depends.
Yeah. And you also hear that a lot of marriages end because of money. What have you seen in your work in regards to money issues and divorces?
Yeah, so money is really tricky because money means different things to different people. So let's suppose whenever you're anxious, you go shopping. I don't know if you do that or not. I'm just an example.
Right.
And
But I don't, yeah.
and um, and the partner is someone who is really careful with money. Well, that's going to push their buttons big time. So you have to get into, okay, why are you shopping? What's this doing for you? The anxiety. Let's start dealing with your anxiety. And for the partner, you have to get into what does spending money mean to you? What does saving money mean to you? Can you loosen up and feel a little safer? Because this person's always going to want to spend more than you're going to be comfortable with, even if we get the anxiety piece out. So it's, again, you still have to get into what's going on underneath and how can we talk about it and then work as a team instead of you're right, I'm right and you're wrong, which is,
Yeah.
where people end up, and then that builds and builds and builds, and other issues come into it, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes the kitchen sink.
Do you believe marriage is one of the most, are supposed to be one of the most healing relationships you'll ever enter
Uh,
into?
Um, I think that's a trick question because relationships bring up your deepest wounds
Mm-hmm.
to be healed.
Why,
So
why does that happen? Why relationships? And I know the
that,
world is built on relationships. Everything we do is relationships. Why do you think that's so?
well, that's imago therapy. The Harville Hendricks and his wife, I can't remember her name right now. The Hendrickses, that's their. They did a whole bunch of work around that belief that there's a purpose to relationships and that it's a setup. We attract in people who have the opposite issues that are going to trigger us so that we can have those issues come up so that we can work on them and become more healed. Now, what happens is it's really hard at first, but
Yeah.
if you can keep healing those issues and both people heal their issues, then it can become a really nurturing, solid, supportive, healing relationship.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So, how can we begin the journey to,
Well,
yeah,
go ahead. No, you go
I know
ahead.
the journey is long, like you said, it's a winding road, it's so many things. But if we know that there's some issues, like, we're reactive or we're sad or we're angry, how do we take that initiation upon ourselves to begin this journey of healing?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do. There's a ton of great books out there just to start understanding yourself. Learning about attachment is really important.
Mhm.
Like, why do I react this way? Why am I having these feelings? Um, I'm a big advocate of therapy. I mean, I'm a therapist and I've had tons of therapy myself. So I think therapy can be life-changing. Workshops can be good. 12-step programs can be good. And then there's things even outside of the box, like diet. Like there's all this connection between our feelings and our gut. So if you're eating a bunch of junk food, your brain is not going to be functioning optimally. So it's a big, giant arena. So there's a lot of places you can start.
Yeah, I agree. It's so much out here. You really have to kind of do a self-assessment, I think, on
Yeah.
like what's affecting you or the people that's around you the most, and then start there for sure.
Yeah, and journaling can be really good too, because it gets you in touch with yourself and it enables you to start stepping back and witnessing yourself. So you're not merged with all those reactions. You sort of are stepping back and analyzing them and looking at them. And that's really productive.
Yep. You talked about attachment, right? And I think that's huge, attachment styles. Is that how we were programmed in our childhood? What is attachment styles? What is that? Is that
Right.
how
Okay.
we receive love or give love, or what
It
is
starts, yeah. So it started with John Bowlby, whenever that was, the earlier 1900s. Uh, it was in the 1900s. It wasn't the early 1900s, but anyway, he started looking at the infant mother dyad, and we could expand that to the infant parent dyad, but we should, but I'll just gonna say infant mother for
infant
now.
mother is probably good because I'm thinking just how the infant is in the womb 9 months
Right.
connecting.
Right. And what if the mother is suicidal while she's pregnant, or wants an abortion while she's pregnant? Or, I mean, not that she should or shouldn't have one, but anything going on or she is an alcoholic while she's pregnant, or she's
Science is
being,
proving that. It's proving
yeah,
that the baby is feeling those emotions or getting those hormones or lack of and all
yeah,
that.
Yeah, so that starts there, and then when you are born and you're being held,
Mm,
is the mother attuned?
mm,
Or does she not wanna deal with you? Or is it happen later where you start crying and she's like, "Ugh, to deal, I wanna jump out the window," or, all that stuff, or the child has to get rid of their feelings so the mother won't go away, or some other family member that's close and attachment based and has caretaking responsibilities. So it happens in that dyad and it continues. I don't know where the cutoff is, but you're impacted by all relational interaction.
mm.
And you are forming your whole neurological system while that's happening. So you're getting wired according to the environment and how you're being attuned to or not attuned to.
Mm. That's that's important to understand and to realize.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had a guest on the podcast. Her name was Elizabeth Hoekstra, and she's an adoptee. She was adopted, but she talked about how during her therapy, whoever she worked with guided her back as a baby in the womb, and those feelings and those emotions of not being wanted by the mother and not having that cuddling, that holding, because I think she was, I guess went through some type of orphanage, foster care, or whatever until she was adopted. And so
Right.
the child is not attaching at all.
Right. So now
And
you have a disorganized attachment with a um, avoidant, with the avoid, there's, avoidant slant, which means the attachment signals are not working the way they would in someone else. You're not securely attached. You want the attention, but you also push it away. But you also tend to, and all the non-secure attachment types, it's anxious whether you can see it or not. There's anxiety under all of it because these are strategies to get our caretaker to be close. But that's someone who probably rejected attachment entirely,
mm,
and that person will have a big journey to get comfortable with the feeling of being loved and held, and make friends with parts of herself that, had to develop to survive.
yeah.
So that's when you get into parts, like the
Mhm.
part that craves attention, the part that, it wants to jump out of their skin. I mean, there's these, different parts that develop because it's not safe. Like let's suppose you had a parent who was schizophrenic and dangerous. It's not safe to be attached. So what do you do as an infant when your very survival depends on that person? So we develop these strategies to survive.
Wow. That's interesting. Is there any symptoms or clues that we could recognize in our own children and the people in our own family, even as parents with our children? Maybe we didn't have that close attachment when they were infants. Is there anything we could recognize as kids are coming up? Is there anything that starts to happen that we could kind of grab hold of early and maybe start therapy or anything like that?
Right. I don't think it's ever too late for anything generally. I wouldn't say completely. There's definitely too late cases, but I think a lot of stuff can be fixed.
Mhm.
Um, thinking of I was thinking once I was in a parking lot and there's a mother with probably a 3-year-old, we'll say, and the kid was crying violently because he couldn't have a toy or something. I don't know what was going on. And she wasn't saying what she should have said, which is, "I'm really sorry you're upset, but we have to go home and we couldn't buy that toy, and we'll get you another toy sometime," or whatever she needed to say, but I'm sorry this hurt your feelings. Instead, she was screaming at him. So that's a kid who's going to develop and not trust that he can have his feelings, that they'll be honored, that someone will understand them, and he's going to get rid of his feelings. And his feelings will probably be anger and frustration because that's what he was able to express, but not his feelings of vulnerability. And so if the mother, let's suppose she started therapy and she had a turn of understanding, started, talking about what happened, what she wished she did, started behaving in a different way, started treating him differently, then there's possibility that this child could start going, oh, and like amending could start happening.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Are there any things that you're seeing a lot in your work, in regards to just the differences between men and women?
I have a friend, a psychologist friend, who's reading a book called The Female Brain. I haven't read it yet. And,
I
but
bet
I
that's
need to,
good.
yeah. She said it's so affirming, at how different the brains are. And the testosterone, so when the male starts developing higher levels of testosterone, it actually shuts down parts of the
Mhm,
more empathy parts of the brain, because
mhm,
biologically they're supposed to go out and get food, hunt. So, and the women, what develops more is the emotional nurturing brain. So
mm,
we do have two different brains. And I mean, I think part of the male journey at this stage of the game is developing more of the emotional nurturing brain. And I think a lot of men are doing that. But the ones that aren't are not going to have, they're going to struggle in their relationships if they're with someone who wants that emotional nurturing in their relationship.
yeah. Now, what's the percentage of women that you see that just don't have that compassionate or the empathy or the nurturing brain turned on?
Yeah, I don't know what percentage, but there are definitely women that do not have that. And that would indicate a significant amount of early damage.
Yeah. Mhm. Wow. So, in your opinion, what is self-mastery?
Okay, self-mastery means you know who you are. You're not afraid to be who you are. You have a fair amount of trust in the universe. I mean, obviously, it's hard to trust the universe given what we see every day, but you have enough trust that you can navigate through your life. You can make good choices for yourself. You pick good people for yourself. You've developed whatever your talents are to some degree, or you've picked certain parts of yourself to develop that are nourishing to you. Um, it's just becoming and you have satisfaction in your life because of those things. So I would say it's sort of along those lines.
Yeah. Does that play a role in how successful our families are or our relationships?
I think it plays a role in that's a tricky little question too. I think it plays a role so in other words, someone might not be good at relationships, but they might have a lot of self-mastery in their career. So how much of the person are we looking at, the whole person, parts of the person? And like my father had enormous self-mastery in his career, but
Mhm.
not as a relational human.
Yeah.
So from watching his career, I learned you can create something out of anything. In
Mm.
other words, you can start with nothing and make something. But I learned by watching his career. Now, watching his relational abilities, I didn't learn that at all. I learned that I wasn't worthwhile. I mean, I learned all the worst stuff. So, it depends where a person's developed. And to me, self-mastery is more than just one area. It's your whole being,
Yeah.
which would include that you've developed your relational ability, you've developed the parts of you that have a mission or a purpose, if you do. I mean, I don't think I think some people are here just to experience and have families and love and create joy that way. And other people are out to do a project. I mean, different people have different
Yep.
purposes. Yeah.
Mhm. I agree. Yeah, I definitely think it's a holistic view of all areas of your life. You mentioned earlier, like there's the career path and then there's a self-development path. But I think that even in the career path, we have to relate. We even in our careers, we have to deal with people, we have to relate to them, we have to figure out how to, speak to people, all of that. So I think
Yes.
it kind of goes hand in hand. Let me ask you, because we see people who are extremely successful and then they commit suicide.
Right. So they're
So
not quite,
yeah,
yeah,
there's all this success on the career path, but then clearly there's been some blockages in the self-development path. So
right. Because they don't fully love themselves, or they don't know what is enough, or they might not even know how to reconcile who they think they are versus what their outer world looks like. I mean, yeah, and depression can hit anyone. I mean,
It can, and at any time. So you
yeah.
have a book, The Art of Becoming. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that's not published yet. I have an agent who's sending it to publishers, but that is a, so I didn't know what I was writing when I started writing that book, but it turned into what it wanted to be. And that I took a lot of my old writing that was in binders and folders and on the computer and some that was on my blog, and I started piecing together the journey of developing one's intuition and learning how to, yeah, developing that part of ourselves that consensus reality has sort of put down in women, which
Mm,
is our witchy side, our female side, our emotional side, our side that gives birth and has blood, the side that, is connected to the earth, the side that knows things. Like sometimes you just know something.
it's no.
So, yeah. So I started writing. So it ended up being about witch, the word witch, which is, really, I mean, it's having a little comeback now, but it's pretty much a pejorative term where people, look down on
Yeah.
intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started writing about the emotional intuitive journey. And I weaved in things that had to do, working with tarot cards, which helps you develop your intuition and
Mm-hmm.
helps you understand stories, because it's
Mm-hmm.
really a deck of stories. Each
Mm-hmm.
card is a story, and how that can teach people. And I run a soul collage group. It's called Soul Collage is actually a known thing that someone invented that, and anyway, I do it my way, but I run a group once a month. A bunch of women come and we make collages together, and then we talk about what the cards mean to us. And it opens up the intuition. Like, why did I put that image with this image with that image? And what is it saying to me? What is
Exactly.
that card saying to me? And when you do that kind of work, it's creative work, that you start opening up your intuition. And most people have been taught not to trust their intuition,
Yep.
or they've been taught that they're not creative. Oh, that doesn't look like an apple, that thing you drew, or you're a kid. That doesn't look like a house with clouds. Instead of really understanding what it is to be creative, a lot of people got caught in the literal. It has to look real.
Yep.
And that's called rendering. That is not necessarily art. It's
Yep.
rendering when it looks real. So sort of breaking through that and helping people find more of their different parts with different voices that are coming out as they make things.
And I think that is the feminine brain, that creativity and that intuition. And you use the word witch in your writing in The Art of Becoming. How would you define that? Is that just that woman that's using her intuition? Because it has gotten a bad rap. I mean, there's been a
Mhm.
lot of stuff through the years.
Right.
People were killed, for
Right.
tapping into
Pe-
their intuition.
People are still being killed in parts of the world. There's
Yeah.
still
So
stonings, and they dig a pit and put the person in, and then they throw, I mean, we won't even get into it, but it's
yeah,
ugly.
and I personally think it was a lot to is a patriarchy society. It was a way to keep women from knowing who they are
Right.
internally, knowing their personal power.
Yeah. And it was certainly in some places connected to religion and keeping the
Yeah,
power in the hands of the holders of the power, and out of the groundwork power, the grounding, the power of knowing that
exactly.
you don't need a position for. So yeah, no, it's I think because I did some research as I was writing the book about all that. And to me, it can be a woman or a man. I mean, we're out of gender at this point. We're
I
into
agree.
just, we all have male and female parts, and how well
Mhm.
are they integrated. And but if, like, just imagine you're in a village that is patriarchal, and all of a sudden there are, a bunch of blight that comes through, and all the crops go, and somebody has to be held accountable because the belief system could be such that, God isn't bad, so we're being punished for something.
Mhm.
That, I mean, it has to do with beliefs. It
Mhm.
must be that one who's been the healer, who's been having visions, and the other people who didn't have visions aren't trusting it, so they get rid of them. I mean, it's a big, complicated.
Yeah. And it makes you think, because how much of what we believe dictates our life, good
So
and
much,
bad.
so much of what we believed. I mean, you can take we won't go into politics, but you could take a political figure and people look at that figure completely differently.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And I think it affects marriages and families and relationships because people come in with beliefs.
yes,
And sometimes
right,
it's just literally been programmed down the line from parents or grandparents, and it stands on nothing, other than the belief of it.
right. Like, I believe the man should make all the money and be in control and make all the decisions. That's a belief.
That is a
Now, if you marry into that, you better have that belief too, or you're gonna have big problems. If
exactly.
you don't have that belief, don't marry that person.
Exactly. So how important is it to talk about beliefs?
It's so important to talk about beliefs. What's important, I think, is talking about beliefs. I mean, I can't imagine at this point a far liberal and a far conservative being married. I mean, how would they even do it in this world? What a mess.
Yeah.
But also our dreams, like, is each partner willing to support the other person's dreams? Like, one person dreams of, this, and the other person poo-poos it. Well, that's not going to work either, because that's that person's dream. That's what they want in this life.
Yeah.
So it's important to talk about beliefs and dreams and how you see different situations like money and raising kids, and if you want kids or not. Like, don't get married before you've had that conversation. Do you
That,
both want kids or not? If one of you wants 5 kids and one of you wants 0 kids, you again have a big problem.
yeah. And that's important. Is there anything in your work and the people that you work with that they were like, I should have thought about this before getting married? Is there any advice you would be like, you need to settle this before getting married?
Right. Yeah, it would. I mean, that's why people do premarital counseling. Um, but what happens is people fall in love, and the bliss,
Everything goes out the window.
yeah, because falling in love is a drug. It's not.
It's
Love is something.
hormonal.
No, it's like when you have a garden, so I have a garden, you actually have to put in soil, you have to keep the weeds out, you have to tend to the plants, you have to water that, and so you get a plant to grow. That's the love. If it's just the bliss of falling in love, well, that's, let's hope it lasts, but if you don't garden your relationship, it probably won't be so great. You'll have
Yeah.
a very weedy, difficult situation.
So you believe love is action. You believe love is an action word. It's like you
Absolutely.
said, it's watering, it's plowing, it's doing all that. What is your opinion on unconditional love? Does that exist?
Unconditional love. Well, I think parents often have unconditional love for their infants. Now, as they get older, I think the child can trigger the parent, and then love becomes more conditional, because
That is
kids develop
interesting.
egos and different needs. And, what if you're homophobic and you get a gay kid? I mean, that could be a big challenge for that. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's just unconditional love is, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know that I think it's hard to be completely unconditional, but I think as you mature, you get more and more unconditional.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a love of the divine that's truly unconditional. But I think as long as we're in these human bodies, I think it's just accepting people for who they are without trying to change them and
Right.
without trying to get them to adapt to your beliefs or whatever it is. So it's just saying, I'm okay with being me and I'm okay with you being you. And I think that's all it
But
takes.
but where you get into problems with that, and I agree with that, but where you get into problems is the emotional needs. If I have an emotional need for you to be close to me, but who you are doesn't allow you to be very close to me. Let's suppose I only feel close to you if we're having sex. But the rest of the time you're sort of checked out, you are doing something, whatever. Then
Yeah.
we're dealing with and so that's sort of,
Yeah.
because we're very attachment based. And
Yeah.
so you need both. You need the part of I accept who you are, and I have needs. and I want you, we're in an emotional relationship. I would like us to be able to talk and feel close all the time, and not all the time, but feel close a lot and be vulnerable with each other. I want to be able to trust you enough that I can share anything with you.
Yeah, and that's definitely having a safe space for people. I think you have to know when the capacity is not aligned,
Right.
and then you have to make a decision
Right.
because somebody's going to suffer. And I think in love, you can say, you know what? I love you. I wish you well. This is just not a good fit. And we need to allow ourselves to go find people that is a good fit for us.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and this is a huge question with people when they're in, committed relationships. Now, before you get committed, that's really much easier to do. Um, Once you're in a marriage and you have kids, for
Yeah.
instance, it's a lot harder. And so that's when you go, look, I am not feeling nourished in this relationship. And I would like us to get to a point where we feel nourished with each other. And are you willing to go on this journey with me or not? And if you're not, we're going to have to go our separate ways, no matter how painful it is. But
Mm.
if you are, I'm willing to do it with you.
Yeah.
And sort of setting it up that way. And the person might try and they just don't do it, or they might say, I'm fine the way I am. And
Yeah.
that's when the door opens and shuts and you see you later.
Yeah. And I think we allow ego and pride to really drive our relationships. And sometimes we miss out on probably the most beautiful thing that was meant or destined for us to experience. But we
Yeah.
just allow the ego and pride. Now, let me ask you, Jennifer, do you think that it is someone's else responsibility to make us feel nurtured or loved or cared for, or
You are good
that's
at the
some,
trick questions.
yeah, is that somebody else's responsibility?
Well, it's not someone else's responsibility. It's our own responsibility to find our own meaning and our own sense of purpose and our own grounding in our lives. However, if you choose to be in a romantic relationship that's committed, you still have emotional needs that you will want met. So that's why it's sort of like, let's take my first marriage again. So I had a great life. I went to grad school. I did a lot of training, tons of training, and was learning. And I had just great friends, and I was happy in my life. I wasn't happy with my relationship.
Mm,
So but I was happy in my life, and I could claim that.
yeah.
But I wanted a bigger life where I would be happy in my life and in my relationship.
So would you say you wanted to integrate? It's almost like aligning that career and personal together. And
I want
I think that's so important. I want everything clicking. I want what I do outside of work, at home. I want my friends. I want everything clicking. That's
Yeah,
so important.
yeah.
But I could see how people are living one life and then at home it's different because it's not integrated.
Right, because they have areas that are really developed and they've self-actualized in, and other areas where they're in a situation that just isn't satisfying, and if they can't get it to be satisfying, they might have to change it.
Yeah, I get
Especially if they want the big life where everything, works.
it. Yeah. And I think with the right balance, you could probably get everything you want in the right balance,
Yeah,
with the right
yeah.
decisions and the right.
Yeah, if you're it's also, has to do with grace and things like that, because there's
Yeah,
people obviously in parts of the world where they don't, they're screwed no matter what.
true.
Doesn't matter what they do, but we
Yeah,
aren't in that situation. We're the lucky ones that can make the most out of what we have.
yeah. So tell us about Reconcile.
So Reconcile has been a labor of love for a long time. I, yeah, so how do I even describe? I spent 4 years writing the content. I did a lot of training to understand how to systematize couples work. Like
Mhm.
what does a couple need to know first? What do they need to know second? What do they actually need to look at and deconstruct in themselves and then talk about? How do they need to talk about it? How do we get them to move from communicating about what they think to communicating about what they feel, because
Mhm.
that's part of it's you have to start somewhere, and usually they have to start here and move down. So I did a lot of training, and then I did a lot of writing, and then the app is out. We are still improving it as we speak, doing changes to it because we're trying to make it, it's fairly new. We had it out for a little while and it wasn't ready yet. So now we did a bunch of work and now it's much closer, and we're still doing a little bit more work to make it easier for the user to have discussions, to notify their partner that they want to talk about this subject that they read
Mhm.
about. So it's just been a massive, massive, massive project, and yeah, it's out
So,
there.
so a couple could does one person or does the couple have to download the app?
So it's set up as a monthly chart. There's a freemium version, but that's just sort of a taste. It's not enough to really get real work done. But to give people an idea of how it works. But the subscription is $13.99 for two people. So it's not 26. It's not the one person pays, the other person's free.
Okay.
And but you can do it by yourself. I mean,
Okay.
you can the exercise, you can do the reading, and so let's suppose you've had bad relationships and you're like, I want to learn what's going on. That you can do it without someone.
Okay.
Or you could do it, you could be in a relationship and the other person doesn't want to do it, and you're doing it just to learn for yourself. Or the both of you can do it. You would both, one person would pay, you would both download the app. So one person doesn't pay because it's up for two people.
Hmm.
And you start, there are recommended foundational topics. There's an AI chat wizard, which you can ask a question, and the entire content of the app is in it, that the chat has access to. So you
Hmm.
could ask a question, it would give you, sort of give you, but the real value, I think, is doing the reading, then doing the exercises, and then talking about them with your partner. Like, what did you, and also there's a quiz that helps you see where you're strong in your relationship and what you need to work on.
Hmm.
And once you start looking at, why did, and looking at, well, we're weak here. We both have trouble with conflict, but we're good at something else.
Yeah.
Then it points you into those topics and you can start reading and then doing exercises. And then you can say, okay, let's talk about what we learned in this. And it gets you on the process of starting to, they've done a research, couples education, it helps couples enormously.
Hmm.
It's a huge, I forget the numbers, but massive help. And this also integrates getting people into their feelings, their vulnerable feelings, and learning how to communicate. It has menus of words like, so when this happened, what did you feel? So you can start identifying, and it will have a choices, and you can put in your own answer. But so people can start like opening the box that's been shut and having a way of communicating instead of just getting caught in the dog chasing its
Yeah.
tail.
And is this like is this what's the perfect person? Like, is this for someone who prefers that independent, kind of
Yeah, yeah.
discovery of
So,
themselves?
yeah. So let's suppose you make a ton of money and you can afford therapy. Do it. It's great. But let's suppose you don't have that kind of resources,
Right.
and you can't pay 200 bucks every week, 800 bucks a month, or whatever it would turn into.
Mm-hmm.
So 13.99 a month, you can get help. So that was the whole point was, I was working with all these people, they could not afford the help they needed. How do
Yep.
we get them help? So,
Yep.
and also, I believe you have to be somewhat of a self-starter.
Yep.
Like, if you aren't a self-start, if you're completely passive and you can't like show up for yourself, you're not gonna do it.
Yep.
So
Nothing.
that's,
You're not gonna do anything. You're not gonna
you're
show
not
up
doing
for
anything.
anything.
No,
Yeah.
your life will just be a flat line. You won't.
Yep.
So yeah, you'll maybe show up for work and, buy groceries, but you have to be able to say, I want to change this. Or you might be in enough pain, emotional pain, that you say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And then
Yeah.
you do it.
And it's convenient. I mean, I think you could do it in your car, you could do it on your lunch break, you could, is it something that you work through lessons or and then there's a stop point or okay.
Yeah.
So
So, well, originally I set it up as a linear system, do this, but
okay.
then I broke it into topics because some people didn't want to do linear. So,
Yeah.
but the linear system exists in audio. So you could listen to it as podcasts in the
Okay.
car when you're driving, because it's got
Yep.
18 levels of audio. Well, I'd say 3/4 of the content is in audio. The very, very advanced stuff isn't, but you need to do the beginning anyway. And then the rest of it is broken into topics. So emotional safety, communication, sex, fighting, learning about your cycle, learning about your history, family history. So there's all these topics, and you go into a topic, and there's some subtopics under the topics, and you pick one. And then it comes up what we call content cluster, where you have lessons, insights, which are little short pieces when you don't have time, stories, exercises, and some of them have meditations, guided meditations to
Yeah.
get you in your body or calm you down. And there's also an I'm upset module. So if you're too upset to focus, you go there and it gets you calmed down. It gets you to journal. It gets you to create a letter to your partner that you're guided to do. So you say the right things. So there's a lot of tools and resources in it.
Yeah, I like it. And why did you call it Reconcile?
Um, well, reconcile, so it's a play
That's
on
what
reconcile.
I was thinking, but I wanted
Yeah,
to ask you to be
yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
I think it's amazing because it really does, it offers an affordable way for people to just start doing the work, and you have to want to do the work. How do you think AI is going to play in the healing and the wellness arena as we move forward?
Well, that'll be interesting. The AI is good at organizing information.
Hmm.
Um, so you do an AI search and you get all this information. Uh, I don't know yet how good it is at moving you through into deep emotions or not. We'll see. It's still
Yeah,
developing. I mean, we
yeah,
did put AI into the app because I was like, what if someone has a question about something and they could just put it in and they'll get, you need to do this, this, and this, or read this topic and this topic. It will, sort of guide you. I think AI has a lot of possibility. Of course, it's got a lot of dangers too. And
yeah.
hopefully we'll use it wisely.
Like everything else, like everything
Yes, it's
else.
like everything else. Exactly.
Yeah. A few more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Uh, is there a book that you can recommend to our listeners that helped you along the way? It could be
Yes.
whatever topic.
There's a ton of books. Lucia Capacchione, she wrote, do you know her?
Mm-mm.
She wrote I think she wrote The Creative Journal, The Power of the Other Hand. And she's written a lot of books where you use your non-dominant hand to dialogue with your other hand or draw pictures. Like you might draw a picture of your body and your shoulders sore. What does your shoulder want to say? I'm carrying too much weight.
Ah,
So she helped me a lot in identifying, like, why was I feeling anxious? What was my stomach trying to say? Why was I anxious? I'm afraid of blah, blah, blah. And so, like, it really, her books, and her name's hard to spell, it's Italian, but it's Lucia, Capacchione, I think. So
okay.
her work is good for that kind of self work.
Yeah.
Um, there's a book, Parenting from the Inside Out by Daniel Siegel and Mary Hartzell, which is great for looking at how you're parenting.
Mm,
Like, how is your stuff entering into parenting? It's
yeah.
a great book.
That's
Sue Johnson, who founded Emotionally Focused Therapy for Couples, has some really good books on um, relationships.
mhm.
Stan Tatkin has some good books on relationships. He's another psychologist who works with psychobiological so how when you come home from work, you need to connect, make eye contact, have a hug, because then both your nervous systems settle down. He deals with the nervous system.
Yeah.
Um, Dan Siegel, I mentioned him already, has really good work on mindfulness, being aware of yourself. Um, there's
Oh,
so much out
yeah,
there.
that's plenty. And it's incredible how the physical body manifests so much of the mental, emotional. It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's crazy. It's something.
yeah, no, yeah,
It really does.
sure.
And then what would you say is the greatest matter of your heart today at the time of this recording of the podcast?
Oh gosh. Well, I have a lot going on. dealing, my husband's getting older, so he's having health issues. It's very, affects me. I have concern. I have two dogs that are both old. One of them's not doing well. That affects me, in terms of
Yeah.
holding space and being present and not going into grief. Then I've got work stuff like my book that I self-published a book called The Magic Cake, the 7 ingredients of a relationship ready.
I did see
Perfect
that. I
person.
did see
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
it's just a little short, quick, easy read, but
Yeah.
it looks at the qualities you would want to develop in yourself and have in a partner, like, accountability, good
Yeah.
character, trustworthy, that kind of stuff. My book, I am The Art of Becoming. I, that's a matter of the heart. I'm about to start thinking about creating illustrations for it, just to keep myself creative and involved while I wait for the world to maybe hopefully get it published.
Yeah.
We can tell we're still working on, even
Yeah.
though we're doing marketing now, and I'm doing some work where I'm looking at how the user interface is and making some adjustments to make it better for people. So there's I live in a beautiful place. I have a garden that looks like a nuclear blast hit it because we had
Yeah.
such a bad winter. So I mean, it's just a lot going on, and it's a
Yeah.
big life. And
Yeah. So, as a therapist, what is one of the things that you learn to maintain your peace when there's so much going on?
going on, well, I don't always maintain my peace. I mean, who
Yeah.
does all the time?
Yeah.
But
It's
I have
not an active, like a very, you
yeah.
have to be constantly aware of it.
Yeah, I am, I've done yoga for years. I periodically take breaks, but mostly I do it. I meditated for years. I periodically take breaks, but mostly I do it. Um, I just, self-talk, talking to myself, it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes I read inspirational stuff like Wayne Dyer, or,
Yeah.
listen
I love
to,
them.
there's some monks that are on social media or YouTube that have good, things that help give you perspective, like, um, Swami Kashiva, I don't know what his name is, but he talks about the Bhagavad Gita,
Mm.
where it isn't the results aren't the answer, it's who you become in the process and doing your best. And
Yeah.
that's a really hard thing to hold on to in this society, which is so results oriented.
It
Well,
is.
what does the results matter if you're a rotten person?
Exactly.
So it's really about, who do I want to be? I'm doing my best. It may or may not become what I want it to be, but I put my heart in it. And so I have to work on making that be good enough. And that's, me swimming upstream in terms of what the messages of this culture are.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think externally it is about the results. And I think that's the doing nature of us, but we have to balance that with just being.
Yeah,
Like sitting here, like you said, looking out at your garden, and like that's okay for today. If
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
just do that all day, that's okay.
yeah.
And it's
Right.
just the balance of that. So,
Mhm.
Jennifer, how can everybody connect with you? Are you currently providing therapy services?
I'm not right now. I'm completely in this project,
Okay. This
beyond
is
full
out.
time.
Okay.
Maybe at some point I'll start seeing clients again. I'm not right now.
Okay.
Um, but I have two websites. I have WeConsile.com, which is WeConcile.com, and that explains about the relationship side of things. And then I have my Jennifer Lehr, JenniferLehrMFT.com website. And that one, it has a lot of my blog posts and my personal writing on it, which, so those are the two different, and then of course, social media, and, you have to click,
Yeah.
go see
Yeah.
the social media with, shorts and whatever.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your journey. I think that sometimes people think they're alone in the world and that they're the only one experiencing what they're experiencing. And it's so not true. It's been people that have come way before us that, didn't even have the tools that we now have,
Yeah,
right? Such as We Consult, our therapy, and all these other things, and they made it through. So we have so much tools now,
right.
and this is a way to let people know that there's tools and that you're not alone. So I appreciate you for sharing,
Yeah.
everything you're doing, have done, your journey, because the journey's it's not easy, especially when you're doing this self-development.
Right, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for, yeah.
Yeah. So guys, if you want to connect with Jennifer, please reach her at her websites or social media. And it's been a pleasure. And guys, this is it. This podcast is all about connecting the heart and the mind for perfect alignment. And I will catch you guys at the next episode. Take care.